Welcome to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things West Indies cricket. By the fans, for the fans. Well. We're back, people. We're back for a live. It's a Caribbean Cricket Podcast. You're probably wondering, but hold on a minute. You two said that Static was coming on. We don't know where Static is. We sent out the beacon call for him. He says he's going to be here soon.
Listen, Mash, Static's become an honorary Caribbean, so he's following tradition of being 20 minutes late for this one here.
For real. Normally we're late, but we had to start because we don't know when Static's going to turn up with his lateness. In fact, no, he's in the background.
Oh, he's coming.
Static is actually in the background. Let me bring it in. First things first, though. Before I bring Karthikeya in, first things first. If you're a newcomer to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, welcome. Before you do anything else, press like, subscribe. Copy the link, send it to someone in your WhatsApp group, in your Facebook group, and say, jump on the live. We've got a lot to discuss. It's an IPL special. And actually, Santoki, if I know, I'll leave that. I'll leave that to the end because there's a few comments already that people are throwing out there. We know that we've seen all the comments read the 4-day season. Yeah. We'll do a video on that. That's a separate video. We can't get into that because we'll be stuck here for the next 45 minutes discussing the 4-day season. So we'll do a separate video on that. But Santoki, before I bring Static in, or Karthikeya in, I should say, let's just quickly unpick it briefly ourselves. You know my stance on the IPL. I often say that.
Listen, I'm going to jump in, because it was a historic weekend for West Indian players. It was a sad weekend for Manchala over here because he was tweeting, big and bossy, I'm going to sleep through the whole IPL. It don't mean nothing to me. 17 players got drafted. Mashal, you're going to have to get a Delhi Capitals shirt with Rothman Powell on the back or something because it's unmissable now, the amount of West Indians that are going to take part. Listen,
I'm going to hold my hands up. So last year's IPL, that lockdown one, I didn't pay any attention to it because there was no excitement to it for me to watch games with no fans and this, that, and the other. I just couldn't get into it. Previous years, I've watched highlights of key stuff, but this year is unmissable. 2022 IPL is unmissable because with 17 West Indians in it, for the first time, I might actually be forced to pick a team. I haven't even decided yet, but Santoki, I know obviously we're bringing Karthikeya on, but who was the one pick from that round where you're like, rah, he's got a pick at whatever price or so on and so forth?
Boy, I think, Romario Shepherd, we talked obviously about him getting picked, but I think to get $1 million deal was mad, like unexpected completely for him to get that level of deal. I think even to an extent, we got Nicholas Pooran, we know what he's a superstar, but even him getting 1.4 million was quite surprising. He got so high. We'll delve into that with Static. But also I think the likes of, Obed McCoy getting a deal, Azari Joseph, it was just the guys who we knew have talent, but we were kind of on the fringes or we kind of forgotten about when talking about IPL draft. They all got picked up as well. So it'd be interesting to talk to Static about why so many West Indians did get pulled in. But Mashal, what was your sort of surprise or highlight of the draft?
I'm going to go for, actually, Fabian Allen only going for 75 lakh, if that's even the way you'd say it, which works out to maybe like 100,000 US. I say only 100,000 US. And I just wonder if it's weird, Santoki, because Fabian Allen to me is a triple threat. One of the best fielders in the world, one of the most explosive deft batsmen. He's more than passable with the ball in terms of bowling, yet it's like he gets picked up in IPL year to year, but then never really gets a game. So it's Fabian's a weird one. That he's only worth 100K to a team when actually you would argue he's one of our best T20 players. So, but like I say, we're going to get into it. Let's bring the main man. Karthikeya on. Yes,
Hey, yes.
Karthikeya, what's your audio saying? Is it working?
Does it work now?
Yeah, we can hear you, man. All good.
All cool.
Lovely, 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 lovely. How you doing, Karthikeya?
Good, nice to be back on after a while. Yeah,
It's been a long time, man. It's been well overdue. But Karthikeya, we know you're a massive IPL fan. Just generally, not even specifically West Indian players. How did you find the draft and the whole event around it this weekend?
well, it was interesting. I think it's been 3 years since we had the entire mega auction, right? So, yeah, it was interesting to see how different teams devise different strategies, and even the two new teams coming in. I think we saw a lot more different players being drafted across the world, not just West Indies, as you guys discussed. Alzari Joseph, Forbid McCoy, all these guys getting picks, but even from New Zealand or South Africa, we saw a lot of fringe players getting picks. So it was interesting overall, yeah.
Most definitely. And Santoki and I were just discussing our immediate one. And like I said, I keep saying we're going to break this down, but just straight off the bat, who was your one buy where you're like, wow, for whatever particular reason, who was your one standout buy? West Indian.
Oh, West Indian. I think Romario, as you guys discussed. I think for that price tag, I didn't see that happening. I mean, I was certain he was going to get a pick, but I did not think he would get a 7.75 crore deal. Yeah, because he's still unproven, right? He did not even play the ODIs the other day. So, yeah, that was quite surprising for me.
So Karthikeya, let's get into it. Obviously, West Indies internationally, they've been underperforming in T. Oh, you there? Everything good, Karthikeya?
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
All right, cool. I was going to say, first topic. Let's get away with it. So West Indies obviously performed abysmally in the World Cup. T20s has been sort of hit and miss, but we've seen 17 players get picked in the IPL. What do you think is the reason so many got picked? What is this? Is there a common thread, a common theme as to why so many have been in demand this year?
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't think we performed that well collectively as a T20 international unit, but I think everyone knows there's certain players who offer skill sets to these IPL teams that you don't get from different countries, right? For example, Odin Smith or Mario Shepherd, they hit 2 sixes down the order, they give you 3 overs of fast bowling. I don't see, if I look across other teams, I don't see that being offered, right? And even the domestic supply of players in India, it doesn't cover, say, pace bowling all-rounders or proper six hitters who can go from ball one. So I think that's sort of the appeal in terms of West Indian picks.
I always forget that I put myself on mute. That's it's interesting then, Karthikeya. So I kind of put it out there that someone. So let's use this guy as an example. I put it out there on our Twitter feed that someone like an Evan Lewis went right at the end, right? And he went for, I'm looking at my figures, 265,000 US. And I put a tweet out there saying we all recognize and acknowledge that Evan Lewis is one of the most destructive white ball. In fact, he's probably, if as Santoki says, if we're going to look at the West Indies T20 team, arguably you'd say he's one of the few players whose reputation was still intact after that World Cup debacle. And if anything, you might even argue that his reputation might even have been enhanced after the World Cup debacle. Yet we fast forward to an IPL mega auction and he nearly didn't even get a pick. So when I put that out there into the Twitter sphere, I had lots of people saying, well, at the end of the day, no IPL team really needs an opener. Evan Lewis just isn't required, or an opener's not a necessary, an overseas opener is not a necessary pick unless you are an established brand like a Gale or Warner. Don't know who else I'm missing there, maybe Quinton, etc., etc. So is it as simplistic, Static, getting to my question, is it as simplistic as most IPL teams want finishers, and that's what West Indians specialize in, or like power hitting finishers?
Yeah, I think that was part of it. I think Jason Roy also got only a 2 crore contract like Evan, so that was a bit surprising. But I don't think it's as simplistic as that, because Devin Conway got a starting deal. I think Faf du Plessis, who doesn't even play internationals anymore, he got a starting deal. So no, I don't think it's as simplistic as that. I think there might be some issues with Lewis's fitness. Keeps getting injured these days. He hasn't been playing due to COVID or whatever. So I'm assuming that might be a concern. And he didn't go all that well the last time he played the IPL. So I think those factors combined, yeah.
When he, where,
You know what though?
God.
You know what I was going to say? You know, with Evan Lewis, it's interesting, Mash, because you know I've mentioned before this Mumbai Indians documentary on Netflix that came out like 2-3 years ago. Evan Lewis.
Well, I've never seen it, but someone
Evan
added
Lewis
me and said watch that documentary to understand why Evan Lewis is where he's at.
Yeah, so in that one, Evan Lewis obviously has a wrist injury, and he's saying he can't play. And Mahela Jayawardena, who's the head coach, basically tries to get him to play. And Evan Lewis is like, well, hopefully we'll get Static back soon. But no, just leading on to that in a Netflix documentary, essentially the coaches want Evan Lewis to play, and he doesn't want to play, and in the end he doesn't. And it kind of, I don't know if that would give the impression of Evan Lewis essentially not having the passion or determination, even though he's within his rights not to play if he doesn't feel up to it. Obviously, that was broadcast on Netflix. All the other franchises would see it. So maybe he has got this reputation of being like an injury-prone, not a motivated player. Because, as you said, it was a remarkably low deal for someone as experienced and destructive as he is. Like, we know what he can do. We've seen him do it against India. So it was surprising.
Yeah, most definitely. Static's actually back in the background now, so I'm gonna bring him back in. And listen, when I bring him in, Santoki, my man's not even in the same room he was in before. he's in a new, I don't even know what's going on. Hey, you move rooms, yeah?
Yo, I was sitting outside. It was clear outside, okay?
Yeah.
Then it started pouring.
Listen, man's name is Static, but he's definitely not Static, you know, moving about all today.
But Karthikeya, I mean, like you say, you've touched on Romario, and I'm putting this to both you and Santoki because I do think we need to go in depth on this a little bit more. It is inconceivable to me, even as a West Indian fan, how he could go for $1 million. So, what? Romario's $1 million, $1 million player. Now, here's my prediction. And okay, no. Isn't I don't know if I'm predicting this, but what? Okay, you two are the experts with regards to this, and obviously Romario being a Guyanese player as well. Will Romario go the way of a Sheldon, where he gets the $1 million bag and then he's gone the next year, or is his skill set so valuable he's gonna just keep getting deal after deal after deal? Why did he get $1 million? What team? What team did he go to? Was it Sunrisers? I forgot
Sunrisers.
Yeah, Sunrisers. Do you think they got? I was about to say bullied, which is the wrong word. Do you think they got tricked into going that high? Surely nobody would have set out thinking they needed to get him for $1 million. Santoki, you go first.
Boy, well, it's like Karthikeya was saying. Obviously, it's a rare skill set that he has he can hit sixes from the get-go. If he comes in, you can back him to score 6 of his first ball, for instance. And when you add into that fast bowling, I would personally say he's a better batsman than Odean Smith, consistently. But as we said, this time last year in the Super 50, he was going for 100 in the final against Trinidad. So there are fault lines in his bowling. $1 million surprising to me. I knew he'd get a deal, but I didn't think it would go to $1 million. So it'd be interesting. Karthikeya, obviously we know of the IPL, there's more to it than just the player's talent. There's often strategy where they come in the auction. Was it anything to do with that? Why do you think franchises bid so high for him?
Yeah, it was partly that, because if you go so high, that means 2 teams are bidding for you. It's not just one, right? And RR went all the way up to 750 because they had a number 7 slot vacant, and they weren't able to fill it up for I think an entire day. I think Romario went on day 2. They had the vacancy on day 1, and they weren't able to fill it up. So they got a bit desperate. They went all the way for Romario. But I don't understand why Sunrisers went all the way up to 775. I mean,
if you were on their table,
as you said, because they had Indian seamers, they had all-rounders already in there. So I didn't understand that. But I think it's partly just that again, because he's seen as this player who can hit sixes. He can give you death overs. although it's not completely polished, they probably think it's going to come off at some point. Probably a long-term investment.
If you had been on their table, would you have advised them to pull it? Like, was there need to get someone greater than? I don't know what I'm trying to finish my sentence off with there. Did they need that player so badly that they had no choice? I guess is what I'm saying.
No, I don't think that was the case. I'm sure there were options after him who could have. I mean, I don't know where he's going to bat for them because they already have Washington Sundar, who's pretty much an all-rounder now. So they're going to have to play Romario at 7, but they have other options out there for them as well. So, yeah, I don't understand what value he offers at 8 for that team now.
So you're calling it bad strategy then?
Yeah, I would call it bad strategy. And we saw a lot of it from them throughout the auction. So I'm not putting it past them.
I mean, well, that wasn't the only $1 million player, Santoki. We had 4 of them. Should we go to Puran?
Yeah. So you know what, Puran. So obviously we all knew Puran would get a deal and a high deal, but 1.4 million, one of the highest overseas buys in the IPL in history, 1.4 million. Now, I read an interesting theory that partly the reason why it was an inflated price was Quinton de Kock went in the first list, the marquee list, and he went quite cheaply because franchises all wanted to get Ishan Kishan. Once he had gone, franchises basically panicked, and Nicholas Puran was the next wicketkeeper batsman to come up after that. So that's why they bid so high for him. So Karthikeya, was that your view on how things went and why Puran got 1.4 million? Or was it just a case of they believe in his talent and potential and believe that he will be worth that over the next 3 years?
Yeah, 100%. I think with the 10-team auction, there were not many starting wicketkeepers in the market. And Ishan Kishan, someone Sunrisers went for, but Mumbai took him for about 15 crores or something like that. So there was no way they were going that high. And yeah, Quinton was taken right before that. Johnny Bairstow went to Punjab. There were 2 other teams that did not have keepers, rather 3 teams. There were KKR, Gujarat, and Sunrisers. And Sunrisers basically panicked and ended up going all the way. I think the other 2 teams who did not get Puran, they did not get a keeper until the Unsold Players came up. It was that bad. So I can see why Puran got that bigger contract. I mean, if Puran came in the auction before Bairstow, I wouldn't be surprised if their prices were swapped over. So it's a bit of luck that goes in with all of this.
See, this is the thing about IPL. It's all down to sort of, as in Puran's case, luck of the timing, because Quinton de Kock went undervalued, you'd say, for coming first, because kind of teams were trying to wait out and see if they could get a good deal on Ishan Kishan. Puran just came at the right place, right time, so he's benefited from that. So with IPL, the money doesn't necessarily always reflect the player's talent and what franchises see. It's kind of just who fits in the situation. So there's a lot of reasons. But another player who got $1 million deal, Jason Holder. Now, Michelle, would you say Jason Holder's warranted enough to kind of get $1 million deal in the IPL based on his recent performances or performances in the last year, perhaps?
I'm glad you've handed it to me because if anybody's truly been following Caribbean Cricket Podcast, they rightly would be saying, hold on, Mashal was the one who said Holder doesn't get into his West Indies T20 side. And the thing is, I still stand by what I said about that with regards to the World Cup. I still don't feel that at that time he was necessarily a first choice player in our T20 side. Obviously, should have been in the 15. Now, Holder for 1.2. Holder for 1.2. Okay, here's my first question. When you're buying Jason Holder, what are you actually buying? What are you actually buying, right? Now, this isn't me critiquing the 1.2 and saying he's not worth that. It was obvious Jason was going to get a big deal because everyone had been talking about it. So it was obvious that was going to happen. But I always wonder with IPL how much of it is recency bias, right? So Jason, for example, prior to the World Cup was shocking. He had a rubbish CPL. He'd been rested in the summer. And obviously he came into the World Cup, had one good game and two very average or inconsequential games, right? Jason has subsequently come back for the England T20s and was brilliant. Cool. He had a good IPL last time out, obviously in 2021 and I think 2020 as well. But what's the skill set you're buying with Jason Holder? What's the thing that makes him 1.2? Is it the new ball bowling? It can't be that. It's not the depth, surely. Is he that valuable with the new ball that is worth 1.2 static?
Yeah, it's interesting because I was not surprised Jason went for 1.2. I think right after that England series, all the talk was about Jason. He got man of the series, I think. I think obviously in that series we saw him bowl very well with the new ball, which he's been doing in the past 2 years. He's pretty consistent with that. So I think they know he's a bank there. He can also float up the order and bat. So again, not many players around the world have that dual skill set, right? So I think they believe they can get value out of him in at least one of those facets if one goes missing, right? And unlike Romario Rodin, I think Jason's done well in the last two IPLs, and that has quite a bit of weightage because when you've done well in the IPL a couple of times, you end up getting a call back. I think teams probably see value in him with that dual skill set, as I said.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I'm not going to be stupid enough to say, wait, it's my question to answer. I'm not going to be stupid enough to say that Jason wasn't, like I say, it was obvious he was going to get a very big deal. I don't even know if Jason really needs to have a really strong IPL 2022 because he's had two relatively strong ones in the last, well, I'd say an above average one and then a very good one last year. So he can just have an average to good IPL and he's probably justified his money. So I don't think the Jason Holder deal is that one worth that much scrutiny. If anything, Santoki, I'd argue with the Holder deal that this is more people applauding the fact that he's almost finally getting the big bag after being a company man for so long. It's like he's headlining WrestleMania now.
No, it's 100%. I feel like people feel the money was justification for sort of the hard years he put in for West Indies cricket and kind of the sacrifice he's made. So 100%, I think that thought process will definitely go into it. But other millionaires that got deals, Andre Russell, 1.6 million. He'd already been retained before the auction. He's a legacy player at this point. I guess Kolkata, he's an established player, so we knew he was going to get a top deal. Shimron Hetmeyer. Now I know Michelle's a big fan of him and was supporting Hetmeyer getting the big deal. But guys, do we think Hetmeyer, with the fitness concerns as well, you have to factor that in. Do you think he was worthy of a $1.3 million deal? Bearing in mind he can play spin well, he can rotate strike, he's an amazing finisher. We've seen the Rajasthan Royals said they're going to work on his fitness over the next few months.
Let me jump in. I need to jump in on that point right there. Do you know how embarrassing it is for a franchise to go, we're aware of his poor fitness, we've got some people out there in the Caribbean and we're going to work with him? Do you know how awful that is? He should be embarrassed that his own franchise is putting it out there that, boy, we need to work with him on his fitness, but he's still got the 1.1 million back.
Yeah, you not think that's mad in itself that you've got a player who's got fitness issues and he's still got $1 million deal? That's how talented they think he is. So, Karthikeya, what does Hetmeyer bring to T20 cricket, and is his value worth that $1 million plus point?
I mean, if he's out on the park and he's fully fit, we've seen what he can do, right? Last IPL, he was probably the best finisher in the entire league. And that was actually a big step up from the 2019 and 20 seasons where he actually didn't fire. So I think 2021 was actually when he came into his own, started firing. He had a couple of good knocks in the World Cup too. And it looked like everything was coming together. And then this happens again. So I think they see him as someone who they can work with and make him realize that potential, right? Because end of the day, this is a mega auction and they're probably locking in players for 4 or 5 years. And I think they see the fitness issues as something temporary and his future potential as something that's probably long term and something they can build on.
I got 2 points that I want to talk on with Hetmyer, though, the fitness aside. First one, actually, just coming off the back of your point, Static. So Pollard said in the press conference today that the team is looking forward to welcoming Hetmyer back. He said that Hetmyer is absolutely crucial to our T20 side. So it's very much a case of the captain Pollard saying, listen, we haven't forgotten about Hetmyer. We know how crucial he is for the T20 side. So everyone's just begging him basically to sort himself out. But the second thing, Santoki and Static, is that who did I say this to? I wonder if it was to... I can't remember who I added and said this point to, or it might even have been me talking to myself. Static just said that Hetty had a great season last year, which he did, but in the finisher role. Is there a problem here? Are the new blood or are West Indies 2.5 or 3.0 T20 side now the golden gen is kind of passed through? Everyone probably looks at our West Indian players and goes, wow, 17 of them got the big bag and they're in the IPL. But actually, if you've got Hetty playing as a finisher in IPL, Russell playing as a finisher in IPL, Pollard playing as a finisher in IPL, Pooran, I don't even know what his role's going to be, but it's not going to be number 3 in IPL. Is that a reason, Santoki, why when we come to put our team together, they can't function properly? Because actually, none of them are playing in the roles that they play for the West Indies.
Yeah, well, I think...
Is that a viable argument to make?
100%. I think the 55 all out against England was a case of every man trying to play a finisher role, essentially, and trying smashing it out of the park. I think you make a good point, Mash, about the new generation, because the first generation, the Gales, the Bravos, the Pollards, their foundations were still in red ball cricket because they learned how to play cricket before T20 was a format. So they had a different skill set, whereas you feel new players, not just in West Indies, probably around the world, are basically focusing their skill set from a young age on being T20 players, finishers, hitting sixes, launching sixes as long as they can. So at the West Indies at the moment, we've obviously got all these players which are great going to the IPL, but they've all essentially got the same skill set, being able to finish in innings, launching sixes. Who's there to sort of build an innings? Evan Lewis is a rare opener, but who's got the skill set to build an innings, play that quote-unquote anchor role, rotate strike, that kind of thing. So it might be a case of we've essentially got too many players filling the same role at the moment. And when that's a role that's in demand on the franchise circuit, you're going to get big money. You don't blame them for going towards that. But in terms of working as a team, it's hard for any coach to kind of make that into some sort of logical lineup. Karthikeya, what are your thoughts?
100% completely agree with that. I think on the franchise circuit, as I said earlier, there's a shortage of players who can come in and hit sixes from ball one, right? I think if you look at all other teams, they actually have a surplus of these anchor type of players, and they want people who can hit sixes, whereas that's kind of the opposite here. And I hear that number 5 is the harder role for someone like Hetmyer or Pooran, but I think their development's going to come only when they bat at number 3 or number 4, actually learn how to construct an innings, right? Like a Gale or like a Pollard who can come in slightly up the order, they know who to take on, they know when to rotate strike. And for Hetmyer, I don't know about Pooran, but for Hetmyer at least, he knows how to rotate strike. I think we've seen that in the past, especially against spin. He's a very capable rotator strike, but I don't think he knows when to do what. And I think if an IPL team bats him at 3 or 4, he's definitely going to progress a lot more than he would have at 5. I think, like you said, last IPL, he succeeded in that finisher role. When he came back into the West Indies team, Pollard had already taken up that role. Russell had already taken up that role. And he had to be put in at 3 or 4. You can't play him as a finisher, right? And it's just not the same. He had to again come in, construct that innings, which he wasn't exposed to in the IPL, so to speak. It's just the CPL where he bats in that role. So again, this IPL is going to bat at number 5 again because that Rajasthan top order is packed with top order players. So I don't know how it's going to work out. Maybe, I mean, the Royals team has taken over Barbados, right? Maybe they'll bring him.
I was just about to ask this.
Developing him. I don't know what happens with that, but
so wait, no, let me jump in. So what we say is that is it the end of Hetmyer at the Amazon Warriors? Yeah.
Listen, bro. Listen. Listen, but to be fair, I see that's how it's going to go. If IPL have got franchises in obviously St. Lucia and Barbados, they're going to want consistency. They're going to want, similar to Narayan playing for the Knight Riders across IPL and CPL, they're going to want that consistency for the brand. So for me, someone like of Hetmeyer's caliber, I would imagine the Royals will try everything they can to get him to move to Barbados.
Yeah, and coming off the back of talking about Hetmeyer being a 5 and a 6, another player who's a 5 and a 6 also bagged the deal, and that's Rothman Powell. He went for 373 bags to Delhi, almost replacing Hetmeyer in essence. So I don't know, Static, if you think that Rothman's definitely going to start for Delhi, but he looks like he's going to be their 5 or 6 finisher, and that's yet another player who is going to be yet another West Indian in the finisher role who can't get in our T20 side as a finisher and will probably be... Well, actually, Russell's the complication here, because if Russell comes back, then that messes up where everyone's playing. But Rothman, I'm happy for him, actually, Santoki. I'm happy that Rothman got the 373 bags. What's your views on Rothman?
Yeah, he's an underrated player, I think. I think he's kind of been cast in the shadows with this West Indies team. But as you said, Mash, recency bias, that century against England in Barbados obviously put him at the forefront of franchises thinking. So I'd like to see him do well as a finisher for Delhi Capitals, just for his own personal kind of success. But as you said, where are we going to fit him again into? He's another finisher who can't get into the West Indies team. So we're looking at it from the perspective of what's best for West Indies international side. But basically, at this point, is every man for himself. They've got to maximize their finisher role. Karthikeya, were you surprised to see Rothman get picked up and for that $300,000 US?
No, not at all. I think, like we discussed earlier, there's definitely recency bias amongst teams, and it's obvious because the way we judge any player is based on recent form, right? In bilateral series, how do you pick a team? You look at recent form. So similarly, recruitment also considers recent form. And Rothman, apart from that England series, he was playing in the T10 right before that. He was one of the top 2 run scorers. He went to the Lanka Premier League. I think he hit 70 of 30 balls or something like that. So obviously Rothman's worked on his game. I think there's some kind of improvement against spin. He's playing that lap sweep a lot more. And I think he himself spoke about it. He's improved on that sweep shot to target to spin. And against pace as well, we've seen improvement, right? He was playing fast bowlers like Tim Mills or Chris Jordan. He was sweeping them. I think he had a lot of time at the crease. So there's obviously visible improvement to the eye, but also there is some kind of recency bias. So I would have picked Rothman because, again, as I said earlier, there is a shortage of those number 5, 6 hitters. So I think it's a well-deserved contract. He'll probably start for the Delhi team as well.
And there's we can't go through every single player in detail because, as we said, it was 17. But obviously, Sunil Narayan, Kieran Pollard, DJ Barber, they all got $800,000 deals. But that's more of their legacy, especially DJ Barber, legacy player for Chennai. So they're going to pay him if he's available. I think as well, Carl Mayers, $66,000. It's not a surprising deal. He was going to play in the IPL in 2020. He's a handy player, can float down the order, can bowl as well. Worth that option. But I guess a talking point is let's look at Obed McCoy. Actually, Mash, this is someone who's kind of gone through the radar. Were you surprised, considering he's been injured since the World Cup? Were you surprised to sort of see him get an IPL deal? We know his talent, but based on his injury status.
Yeah, this is. I need to go and look at the Rajasthan lineup again. I don't know if Obed's actually going to get any games or not. And I just wonder with Obed, and this might segue nicely, and I'll tee it up and then we can go to him next. This might segue nicely into Jaden Seals, right? Was Obed a long-term buy? Like, everyone can see his skill set. Everyone knows that Obed, when he's fit and firing, is certainly he's the best we've got in the Caribbean after DJ Bravo, right? In terms of the cutters, the slower balls, the constant variations. He can go at the front, he can go in the middle, he can come at the depth. The 100K for me reflects the fact that he's got injury problems. So therefore, nobody's really valuing him high. But the fact he got the buy suggests to me that the Royals are like, if we can get this guy and he's fit, in the future, he's a big asset to have. I don't know if they're buying him with any immediate thoughts in mind. Any thoughts on that, Static?
Yeah, I think Obed attracted interest from Rajasthan last year as well. I think that was before he actually got into the West Indies team. They were considering either him or the Fizz, so I'm not surprised they rate him per se. And obviously, the price suggests that he's not going to start in the 11 straight away. He's probably going to be a backup. They're going to work with him on his fitness again and probably play him as and when he's ready. But again, I see it as a long-term buy. As you said, he's got so much upside. Death bowling is something that doesn't come to everyone naturally, right? And he's been showing he can do that across the international series he's played. So yeah, I think it's more of a long-term buy. They'll probably work with him and see how it goes from there.
And Santoki, segue, because Obed makes sense from a long-term buy perspective. And you and I said this on, both of us believed this on Twitter, and we caught some fire from Anmar over it. But I was a bit surprised that, and we're not segueing completely into unsold players, but it's a good segue for this particular player. I was surprised, given it was a mega auction, that nobody thought, let's lock in Jayden Seales for 3 years. It's obvious the potential he's got. Is it because if it's down to recency bias because he's not yet in the West Indies team? Because surely you would have looked at what he did in Lanka Premier League. Granted, it's not the same standard as IPL, but you would add that to his obvious potential. His age is 19. Wouldn't you just lock him in, Santoki?
Yeah, I was surprised. Obviously, as you said, we got a lot of criticism on social media saying he's too young, he hasn't proven himself. But even from the test matches he played against Pakistan, you could correlate that action and how he plays to being successful in T20 cricket. We saw what he done in the Lanka Premier League. But, Mashal, you make a good point. I think it's the case he hasn't got a West Indies cap in white ball cricket. And so there was no recency bias to pick him. But I am really shocked that as a long-term investment, similar to Obed McCoy, nobody put a bid in just to lock him in, because I think this time next year, if he does play T20s for West Indies, you're going to see his value rise up probably by 5-6 times what it would be now. So, Karthikeya, what are your thoughts? Were you expecting Seales to kind of get bids in, or do you think it was just too early for him?
I wouldn't have been surprised if he got a bid, but I think unlike Obed, Jayden's probably not very close to the T20 team, right? He'd probably make it to the ODI team, but I'd be surprised if Jayden is a bolter in the T20 team, especially with the World Cup coming up, right? So probably this time next year, they're going to get him for a low price again. So they probably didn't want to take that risk. But I was surprised someone like KKR didn't go for him, because they've seen him play for Trinbago in the CPL, and he's impressed, right? It's not like he's been going for runs or anything. So I thought they would pick him up for a low price and lock him in. But yeah, I was kind of surprised they didn't engage. But I can see why the other teams think they can wait a year.
I get the point here, Mavado 86. Teams are trying to win now. This isn't the NBA. But then explain the Jofra Archer bid, for instance. He's not going to.
That's my point. Mumbai are obviously Mumbai are strong enough anyway. But that Jofra pick surely is about them saying 2023 we're going to just dominate everyone. So that shows me that, in fact, actually, Static, because I know you're preparing or writing a piece on the moment at the minute about strategies in IPL. Mumbai are one of those rare teams, well, probably why they win so much, who operate to strategy. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, to a large extent. Apart from the fact that their retained players are so good, they can just maintain that core in the long run with Bumrah, with Kishan, Suryakumar, whoever, Pollard as well, obviously. So there's that inherent quality that they retain season after season. But yeah, as we saw this year, they invested in Tim David, who's been growing in the T20 circuit. He's probably one of the biggest buys. They invested in him despite him playing a grand total of 0 internationals, right? They obviously see him as someone who will be a star player for them in the future, similar to someone like Pollard. And Yeah, I think it's similar with Jofra as well. They know he's going to come back in 2023 and pair him with Bumrah. That's probably a straight ticket to the playoffs, right? So, and I think for Mumbai, they know they can tank the season and no one will care, right? They've won so much over the years. So they obviously have that freedom to take that risk. But yeah, some of the other teams, they are trying to win. Someone like RCB, who've never won. There is pressure from the management, from the fans to bring a title home. So I think it's different environments at different franchises. I would not have been surprised if Mumbai invested in someone like Seals, but I wouldn't expect some established franchises who've never won in the past to go big on an unproven player, so to speak.
So speaking of Mumbai, and they did buy a proven West Indian in terms of experience, Fabian Allen, but they did get him for what seems like a cut price deal, $133. Now, me and Michelle were talking at the top of the show before you came on, Karthikeya, and we were saying how it was slightly confusing that he went for such a low deal. What was the reasoning behind that, do you think? Because obviously we know he can bat, bowl, field. You'd think he'd be a valuable asset.
I was shocked. Because we've been discussing how players who hit sixes are in demand, right? Similar to Rothman, similar to even Sherfain, actually. So yeah, I was surprised Fabian didn't get. He wasn't even called in the first 2 rounds. I think. I think Mumbai just brought his name right at the end. So I mean, it would have been sad seeing 16 of his friends go to the IPL and him sitting at home. But yeah, I'm happy he got that deal at the end. But I was shocked. I actually think Fabian can make it into the starting 11 and add some value. So,
you have him starting,
but I don't see why teams don't rate him, right? Because we've seen him do this in the CPL. We've seen him do it at the international level as well. I think his strike rate was over 200 in the last home season that West Indies played. So I was surprised that both Punjab Kings and Sunrisers, who he was at in the past, didn't give him too many games. So hopefully Mumbai will do a better job with him.
I just feel with Fabian, he suffers from not having had a breakout season because no team has really invested in saying, right, we're giving you a run. He just needs a run, a stretch of games to either prove that he doesn't belong in the IPL or he'll showcase his talent and prove exactly why. But I'm wary of time, so there's just 2 more real things I think we should just cover, Santoki.
Yeah.
If we're talking about recency bias, how on earth did Alzari Joseph get a deal? And at that, for 320 bags. He's not even in our T20 side.
Boy, you know what? I was thinking that, but then part of me was thinking he did get 6. He has got the highest wicket haul in an innings for Mumbai Indians, 6 wickets. That sort of legacy in the IPL. And bearing in mind his injuries, you feel like because he is fit at the moment, franchises were always going to take a punt on him just because of that history he has in the IPL. But Karthikeya, what are your thoughts?
See, I don't understand why Alzari doesn't crack T20 in the first place because he's so good in ODIs with the new ball, bowling in the middle overs, enforcing, and even bowls some overs at the death. So I think teams see that he can convert that potential from ODIs to T20s. Obviously, West Indies haven't given him a run in T20s to showcase his talent. In the CPL, he's often hot and cold, but I think teams, he's not going to start for Gujarat anyway, right? So I think they see him.
Wait, did you say he's not going? Do you say he's not going to start?
No, he's not going to start.
Okay, right, fine.
Yeah, so they probably see him as someone again who'll grow into a multi-phase T20 bowler in the future.
Which I guess, therefore, and sorry, I just better put up some points. Obviously, lots of you were saying in the chat that he bowled well versus injury in the ODIs, and maybe that is why. Maybe that was the recency bias that people needed. Obviously, he got Kohli out a bit. He got Rohit out. I think maybe got Kohli out twice, Rohit out twice, and maybe that means something in terms of recency bias. But because it wasn't T20s, I just didn't know if that's really how much recency bias can work. But there's the talking point I just wanted to raise, last real talking point, is the unsold players. Now, we mentioned Who did we mention? Oh, sorry, Seals. But there were 4 West Indians, like major names, who went unsold. Sheldon, Roston Chase, Kanar Lewis, and Akil Hussain. Now, of those 4, the only name that people really wanted to talk about was Akil Hussain. Santoki, I never had Akil getting picked up by anyone. I'm not sure why people thought he would get a pick. Is it because of that 44 they hit against England? So people just assumed he was going to get a pick. But he's an overseas spinner. Like they don't. If Rashid can't get a pick and Mujib can't get a pick, how's Akil Hussain going to get a pick? He would have to hit those like 44 not outs of 16 balls at least 10 more times for an IPL franchise to pick him. Or is that an exaggeration, Santoki?
No, 100%. I think it's recency bias, people trying to label him as an all-rounder, but he has to do it consistently with the bat. I think if that innings against England had happened against India, for instance, we might have seen him maybe get a small deal. But as you said, for overseas spinners, you'd have to be truly, truly world-class, like a Hasaranga, who we know with his tricky off breaks and his batting, his ability to bat down the order, up the order. Someone like him would get a deal. But for an Akil Hussain, you would need to prove yourself as a consistent all-rounder. And I just don't think, I wasn't expecting him to get a deal. I'm not sure why there was a lot of hype around him. And just going on there, Kanar Lewis as well. I know a few people mentioned him because he's obviously shown himself in T10 cricket to be a powerful opener. I just feel he needs more. He needs to prove himself a bit more, especially in CPL, for instance, to get a deal in IPL. So for me, there wasn't really any surprises in terms of who went unsold. I was just more surprised that so many West Indians did get picked in the end. So Karthikeya, what are your thoughts on anyone who you felt missed out from the West Indies and particularly Akil Hussain?
Akil, I think Adam Zampa didn't get a pick. Adil Rashid didn't get a pick. As you said, Mujib didn't get a pick as well. And I think it was kind of harsh on them, to be honest. A couple of guys like, I don't know, Mahesh Tikshana, he got picked. I think Akil probably would have been a better deal than him, or maybe over Muhammad Nabi, but it's just 1 or 2 slots, right? And it depends on which team has that open slot remaining. So, yeah, I'm not surprised Akil didn't get picked.
Yeah, and I think what I would say as well is for the ones who weren't sold, so your Kanar's in the BPL right now, Bangladesh Premier League, and even like a Roston Chase and Sheldon, focus on the minor ones. Like go and play. What leagues are coming up? I don't even know which leagues are coming up right about now. But go and play Big Bash or go and play Nepal Premier League. Do you know what I mean? Like they go and play the T10s in Abu Dhabi later on this year. Like there's other things you can go and play. You don't have you can to give Romario and Odean their due. One of the other reasons why if they built the momentum up, they were playing in those T10s and they started getting they had a strong CPL and then they played in the T10s. So their names were in the consciousness of people. So Roston Chase coming in and saying this is my base price. I think it was 1 core or whatever he said. He put his name base price. Like, what's he basing that off? You can't just have CPL and then just say that's your base price. Go and build your name up in some of the other tournaments as well. So if I was Akil Hussain, I wouldn't worry that he didn't get an IPL deal. Just go play one of the other ones. Go play one of the other competitions and let your name start to resonate that way. Is that the right way, Santoki?
Yeah, 100%. I think the IPL, whilst it is good to get a deal, it's not the be-all and end-all, as you said. And there are other leagues. I do think if the IPL draft had come straight after CPL, when Roston had got picked for the World Cup squad as well, he might have been able to get a bid. But his form has, as we know, dropped off dramatically since then. So he's going to have to try and make his name in other franchise leagues. But you can see why players all want to get into the IPL. I feel once you do get an IPL deal, you're guaranteed to have franchise gigs for the next 3-4 years, just based on the fact that you were in the IPL at one point.
So we have we don't usually end an episode this way, but I feel like we have to. Who's your team for this year then? I'm going to pick a team and I'm actually going to follow them. I can't remember Karthikeya. I think is your team Sunrisers, Karthikeya? I can't remember. But who is your team? I think two choices here. Who's your team to win it? But who's the team you're actually following? Santoki.
Boy, well, I've always been a Mumbai Indians fan just because when IPL first started, my sister went to Mumbai and got me one of the jerseys. So it's kind of worked well because we've had Pollard for all these years. So obviously I'm going to back them again with Fabian. And as you know, with Mumbai, they tend to be near about the title or winning the title most years. So I have to back them.
So what? That's the team you're supporting, and Sane's going to win it.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Karthikeya.
I usually support Sunrisers, but after what happened in the last 1 year or so, I don't know about that. So I really like the Punjab team. I think it's very exciting. So probably gonna follow them.
And
who's gonna win? I think I'm gonna say probably RCB this year. Outside chance for them to win.
Why out of interest? Why RCB?
I think they have a very balanced team this time. So either them or Mumbai.
Okay.
Michelle, come on, man, because I know you were planning on hibernating.
Okay, so the team that's gonna win it, the team that's gonna win it. I'm gonna go with KKR to win it.
This is what I really want to hear. I want to hear who you're supporting.
But the team I'm actually supporting, boy, I'm looking at where all the West Indians are. Do you know what? I'm gonna go for I can't even remember. What's their full name? It's Lucknow what? Super Giants or something?
Yeah, Super Giants.
Yeah, I'm going with Jason Holder's team. Lucknow Super Giants. I'm going for Jason Holder's team. A truce is being called. Jason's my guy. Lucknow Super Giants. That's the team I'm going for.
Listen, if anyone from Lucknow Super Giants is listening to this pod, please send Michelle a kit, a flag. We need him wearing all the merch ahead of the IPL.
That's the side. But ladies and gents, for those of you who've been tuning in, this was a bit of but you better believe, Michael, I'm pure Bajan running through my heart, you know. But ladies and gents, those who've been watching this was a bit of a late one today because it was the only time we could fit it in. So I think a lot of you will probably be watching this on repeat. So thank you for listening. Obviously, press the like button, press the subscribe button, share that with whoever you need to share it with. We've got some more content coming up, a few podcast recordings coming up. Obviously, the 4-day season is ongoing. There's a test squad that needs to be selected, which you assume will come at the start of next week. So Santoki and I will probably drop a video on that at some point in the near future as well. Big up John Campbell, 123. Recall him to the West Indies test team. Just want to throw that in there. Right now. But thank you, Karthikeya. Thank you, Santoki, and thank you everyone who's been listening today. Thank you and good night.
We rule the cricket world. Now the rules.
Welcome to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things West Indies cricket. By the fans, for the fans.